in many ways, it would have been true that okay, like maybe okay, like the Russians, got to the moon first or something. The aerospace industry definitely would have kept going for longer instead of just
Yeah. So then you get into a situation where you really want to plant not just your flag, but a base. And so the scenario that they lay out in For All Mankind is actually kind of interesting. And part of what's, not completely, but part of what's driving things right now is we're in a space race with China. Not so much to be, one and done back on the moon and get off, but seriously put a base on the moon and start growing, a colony there, if you will. Because you don't want to lose that advantage politically. And China has shown a great deal of capability and seriousness about doing this. So, we're still ahead of them, but they've caught up very fast, and they could, I wouldn't be surprised if they've got boots on the moon in another 5 years or something like that. I think we can still get them there ahead of them, but that's one of the things that's driving the space economy. The other one is commercial. The ability, the microelectronics that exist now, think about a phone. Think about how much power is just in this phone. And now think about a satellite that's this big. It's like, okay, I'll put some solar cells around it, and now you've got it powered. And there's a lot of capability there.
Yeah.
So those small satellites with the capabilities of the old big satellites is that's a large part of what's driving the economy now. And to Starlink's credit and SpaceX's credit, they recognize this as, okay, this is a viable commercial venture here. We put up enough satellites that are orbiting the Earth at different altitudes, and that's mostly the same altitudes, but different orbits, different inclinations, and you can cover the Earth with capability. And this was really demonstrated in the Ukraine war, of course. So that's the commercial side of things is also driving the excitement. There's you got Elon Musk, who's a very dynamic individual, whether you like him or not. I've met him for about 5 seconds in a meet and greet, and he's a very enjoyable, entertaining speaker. I've heard of some other things about him too.
So, like the biggest race, or like one of the biggest contributors to getting to the moon and beyond, has been SpaceX. Assuming SpaceX was not a thing, what do you think the U.S. would have done? Because like now, it's like we could go to Germany and find a Von Braun or someone else somewhere.
Yeah, so that is a great question. I think that somebody else like Blue Origin would have emerged. Bezos is far behind Musk.
Has it been to orbit yet? I don't think so.
He has not done an orbital flight.
Okay.
It's only been parabolic. But you still have the old, United Launch Alliance, Lockheed, Boeing. Northrop, they still have very reliable flights at higher cost. And that's where SpaceX is winning, is the ability to churn out rockets as fast as they can. It's amazing to me. I was reading a story, 2022 or 2021, I think they launched about 35 satellites, or rockets, not satellites. Last year they launched something like 56, 57 rockets. This year they're talking about 85 to 90. I mean, my God, that's a stunning number. The old days when they were selling the space shuttle, they were selling it as, yeah, we can turn it around and launch it every week. Well, I think the most they ever got off in 1 year was 8 launches. So but that's partly because NASA is extremely safety conscious about stuff. Yeah, I always find it interesting that, so when Challenger went down, I said I would go up on the next flight myself. The engineer, it was a mistake. Something happened. It can be fixed. And I would go up on the next flight. But if you look at the total number of flights, which was, I think, around 130, 140 shuttle flights, the statistics that the engineers came up with then when they were building the shuttle was they estimated somewhere between 1 and every 65 to 75 flights would have a catastrophic failure. Well, guess what? 2 flights out of 130, 140 is 65, 70. So the engineers were spot on. They didn't know what the catastrophe was going to be. Well, I mean, they didn't know what the failure mechanism was, but that was a really good risk analysis that they put together. But that loss of life is different than just a rocket blowing up with satellites. It puts an extra level of seriousness on things. And so NASA is, excuse me, let me mute this thing.
No worries.
I think that was my parking spot expiring.
After 5,
yeah.
Don't worry.
So, what was I getting at? So with SpaceX, one of my big fears is what happens to the climate, the environment. I'm going to say when they have a failure with people on board. Because, they're talking about so many launches, and eventually, even if they right now they've got a pretty good success rate in the 90s and high 90s, I think. But at some point, something's going to happen. Even if you're a 1% failure rate, that's going to be 1 in 100 rockets with people on board that blows up. And so the climate, the environment may change at SpaceX when that happens. And I hope it doesn't happen. It's just statistics say it probably will.
Yeah, they're getting close to a number, and nothing has, with or without people, nothing has happened yet.
Yeah, they've lost a few rockets, but only with satellites.
Yeah.
Do you think there needs to, let's say a company was started today that was meant to do things better than SpaceX? Which areas do you think would they have to improve? Or do you think they should be improving in?
Wow, that's hard. Okay, so
SpaceX is a big dog right now, right? So
they are a big dog. One of the critiques of them that I've heard from a number of people, a lot of Illinois grads that have gone to work there, is that they work people pretty hard, harder than NASA or Lockheed or Boeing, and they don't pay as much as a lot of the other companies. And they get away with that because of the excitement, of working on rockets and shooting things off into space. I mean, it is a very exciting situation. So, so I can understand why people go work there. But what I do worry about is, as things grow, can they sustain the people? They might have to start, increasing pricing to pay the people to stay and make them feel more compensated, something like that. So I guess to answer your question, I think paying the people more would be what they could do better, but that's going to drive up the price.
What about from the aspect of engineering?
They do things pretty well. They have this approach of running flight experiments that often don't succeed, and they learn from those. And I understand that approach because Wayne Solomon always, the former president of the company, he would always say, well, if you're not breaking things, you're not learning how to make it better. And so it's the same kind of philosophy. You're not trying to break things necessarily. It's just you learn from your mistakes. So they have a really interesting approach. It's a good company.
So you've been, you started multiple companies doing different things in a very much multi-disciplinary manner. When you started CU Aerospace, you said that you had 6 different co-founders in different specialties to ride the waves of funding and sort of this aerospace like boost and bust and boom or whatever,
right.
This cycle. So 24 years running the company, doing many different things. Let's say that you were to go back to college. What would you study, and what would you be looking forward to do? Would you do aerospace? Would you perhaps do material science? Like, what would you do? And
if I were to go back to college?
Yeah, like right now. And what opportunities would you be wanting to attack?
Biogenetics is kind of cool. I think I might be interested in that. It's I almost went into biochemistry when I was young, but ultimately the aerospace drive to be an astronaut drove me into aerospace. In retrospect, if I had been a biologist or a biochemist, I probably would have given myself a better chance to be an astronaut.
Really?
Yeah, because I understand the engineering of the rockets and how they fly and orbit and things like that, but that doesn't necessarily make for a desired skill in space. It makes for a desired skill of how to make the spacecraft better. So if you look at the skill sets that are going up these days, a lot of them are biologically based and geographically or geology based as well. So there's a lot of material science. It's got a lot going on in space too, and agriculture too. So it's specializations I didn't even think about would be good for space travel. But if you do think about them, it's like, okay, if you ever want to go between the stars, you've got to have all the disciplines.
Right.
It's not just engineering.
What about in the future? Because right now we have biological things and chemists and biologists and so on and so forth. In the future, who will be the people going out there? I mean, hopefully commercial people and everything else, but for the people doing the astronauts.
Yeah, well, it's going to be, you got to be excited to go into space, and you got to be willing to live in a can. So you can't be claustrophobic, and you have to really be so excited about going into space, or you won't want to do it. And I know plenty of aerospace engineers that just say, I love building rocket engines, but I don't want to go into space. It's a commitment to be an astronaut. And I think it probably takes a toll on a lot of people's personal lives. So you really have to want to be an astronaut to be an astronaut. But I think all the disciplines are going to play a role, especially if you start having colonies on the moon or Mars or wherever. You need people of all capabilities. Right now, a lot of the mission specialists that go up on the shuttle have multiple disciplines. PhDs in 2 different things, and they can be very diversely different things. So some have a medical degree and an aerospace degree. It's like, go figure.
Have you ever talked to Scott Altman?
I have, yeah. Yeah, the astronaut that I knew the best was Steve Nagel, who
Okay.
sadly passed away. Yeah, I met him first in, it was probably 84, 85. And he was a great guy to sound things off, because I told him, I wanted to be an astronaut, and what should I do? And one of the pieces of advice he said was, don't live your life to be an astronaut, because a lot of people get disappointed that do that. It's just so few people. One of the things he told me later, after I let him know that I made this cut at 300 and then didn't make the next cut, he said, once you make the top 1,000, all of the people are qualified. And then they wipe out about a third of the candidates because of eyesight. They have very specific requirements on eyesight. So I passed those hurdles. But then after that, it's just kind of luck of the draw and who they bring down. And because then the next cut was like a cut of 120 people that were taken down to Houston. And I think they ended up selecting 20 of those. But they're all great people. I've met a lot of astronauts. I've liked them all. Anyway, but you have to want to be an astronaut.
And basically, the application process was you just went to the website and just apply, send an application by mail or something, or
Yeah.
like the typical process, nothing.
Yeah, I think I made that cut of 300 on maybe my second try. And then I kept trying for 10 more years and I couldn't get back.
So this was in the 90s when you were doing a postdoc, or
This was in the 80s and 90s. No, you're right. It would have been in the 90s after I had my Ph.D. So I probably first applied in 92. And then I probably stopped right around 2000, 2001, something like that.
so you apply even when you started your company?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, they wouldn't, because the requirements are PhD or time in the Air Force or something along those lines.
Right. So there are two different tracks. There's the astronaut track, the pilot track, and the mission specialist track. And the pilot track requires you go to test pilot school with the military, so I was out of that one. I didn't have the eyesight for that. The mission specialist track was very kind of open, and that's where I went after. And I'd gotten when I was in LA for a couple of years, I'd gotten my private pilot's license, which was fun to do. One scary moment there, but did a stall that I probably dropped 3,000 feet. That was, it's interesting. So in the private planes, you've got your magnetic compass, just the little ball, and you've got a mechanical compass. And the mechanical compass is generally more reliable, but when you do stalls, it gets all confused. And so one of the rules is when you come out of a stall, you look at both compasses and you trust the little ball. And when I did that stall out in LA, you did your stalls over the ocean. So if you screwed up badly, then you'd crash in the ocean. You wouldn't hurt anybody. But I remember coming out, it was like, these two are 90 degrees different. So where am I? Because in LA in those days, they would have haze alerts, so smog alerts. So you couldn't necessarily see land. So I was over ocean, I couldn't see land. So I just looked at my magnetic compass and I saw, okay, that way's east. I know if I go that way, I'm going to hit land. So that's what I did.
So a leap of faith.
Leap of faith. I mean, it was sensible because there was definitely, two continents there to the east. So I knew I was going to hit some land, and then I had to figure out where I was from there. But you learn the highway system as sort of your roadmap when you're up in the air.
What do you think the political, or how the political ecosystem plays into all the technological development that's happening? So one of the things that you mentioned was how, like, today's space race is also being driven by that competition and how you would want to have that political advantage. Do you think that's a fair way to continue having progress, like a sustainable way to continue having that? And what are the like bad effects that can creep in just from politics into science?
So to keep the commercial side sustainable, there has to be positive money flow for whichever companies end up coming out on top. Starlink looks to be that first company. Well, OneWeb was having some success. And then there's been Globalstar, which has had mixed success. But there's different ones of these commercial communication satellites. But there has to be positive money flow, or then people are going to say, well, why am I investing in losing, a losing setup? So the government would like to get that engine going where the money flow is going, but then they want to sort of back off. Like they want to put up, they're trying to fund commercial entities to put up the next space station or space stations, and then they want to retire the International Space Station, which is now a pretty old vehicle, all things considered. But and NASA is pretty good historically about getting commercial things going. So hopefully that's where we go. And I'm sorry, I forgot the last part of your question.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know how the politics negatively affects the science aspect of all these endeavors. Like how, just because of difference in political aspirations or goals, you need to compromise or do things differently just for the science.
Yeah, well, I think current world politics is, in many ways, well, it's interesting. Okay, so the space race with China is driving both economies to put boots on the moon.
Right.
On the downside of that, or you've lost the camaraderie and the partnership,
right,
that I thought was a very positive environment in the 90s and early 2000s. But when Putin took over, I think it was around 2001 or something like that, things started to change in Russia. And I always remember I visited Russia in 2005, and I met with colleagues, laser scientist colleagues there. But I had dinner with one of my colleagues' sons who was more on the business side. But he'd been educated also in England, I think, so he spoke English extremely well. So it was good. I was able to talk with him. But he said one of the Russian people were excited because of the progress that had been made over the 90s and now in the early 2000s, but they were now nervous about Putin because of his KGB connections and whether he would start driving back towards a dictatorship. Well, that turned out to be a fairly prescient comment because they obviously are. The Chinese also have, I think, pulled back from the international stuff, and that's partly because they kept stealing technologies from the United States, and we started pushing back on that. It's like, look, you can't do that if we want to be friends. And so now we're only sort of friendly. So it's sort of a two-edged sword is the answer to your question. The politics drive it in one way, but drive it also the opposite way. Ultimately, I think, from a sustainability standpoint, you want cooperation to share the costs than to both go after it solo, is my feeling. Now, the U.S. at least would probably go after things with the EU and probably some other countries. So they can share the cost a little bit. Anyway.
You talked about lasers. Walk us through your experience after what you described, like the first flight of the laser that you created.
Okay, so I was trained as a high energy laser scientist, which really means I was trained as a rocket scientist, a laser physicist, an optics guy, a chemist. So it's a real mixed bag, these gas lasers. So in the 90s, I was working on, so in the 80s I was working on a hydrogen fluoride, deuterium fluoride systems, which they make very good lasers with very good beam quality, but you're working with nasty chemicals. Then in the 90s, I was working with the chemical oxygen iodine laser, or coil, which also uses, to get the excited oxygen, you used a witch's brew of hydrogen peroxide and chlorine gas. So one of the questions there, so the coil ended up turning into the airborne laser, and that flew I think they had shots, they were shooting down missiles in 2010, 2011. And the program did not meet specifications, but honestly, in my mind, it was one of the greatest technological achievements that we've ever done, because the ability to detect a missile going, say, Mach 2 at whatever range it was, call it over 50 miles, and acquire it and turn on your big laser system and shoot it down, all within the span of less than a minute, is really challenging. And they were successful with it. They just didn't have the range that they wanted. And there's all sorts of technical stuff that indicates that if they'd given the system more time, they could have had more range and more capability. And so, but for political reasons, this was after the financial meltdown, 2008, 2009, and DOD had to make cuts somewhere, and they decided, okay, since this system didn't meet its technical goals, then we're going to cut this system, which personally I think was a mistake, but it's what happens. And so politics, once again, plays a big role. The missile guys are out there saying, oh, I can shoot down a missile with a missile. It's like, well, yeah, you can, but they're only about 50% successful. And so I get, if you got nuclear missiles coming at you and you're only 50% successful when they can kill you 1,000 times over, it doesn't really matter. So I think from a technical standpoint, shooting down missiles with a missile is sort of like shooting a bullet with a bullet, is not the right approach. I think you have to do lasers. And unfortunately, the government has backed away from that a bit for the big lasers. But the laser that I invented was the electric oxygen iodine laser. So we got rid of the chlorine gas, we got rid of the basic hydrogen peroxide, and we had an electric discharge on the oxygen. And that was actually one of my, we never flew it, we got up to about 500 watts in power, which we had proposals to keep going, but things were shutting down at that point. But I think that be one of my most proud moments was when we actually got the thing to Lays, because it was such a difficult problem that we were in the middle of funding, and we'd started to lose the people that had funded us, and they were starting to lose faith. Can this really be done? This is too hard. This is an impossible problem, and nobody else has done it. And then we were able to prove them all wrong, and so that had a certain excitement and pride to it, of being able to do something that nobody else had done before.
That's true. It's like that feeling you cannot like recreate it, because it's like there's only one of something.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about that recently too. I saw like a tweet about iTunes before it was released. So the concept of a playlist, right? That did not exist before, but so before it was released, like Steve Jobs emailed himself like a playlist that he had made on iTunes. That just like felt very powerful to me. Like you make a tool and you're like finding applications for it, and like you're the first one to like start to begin to realize its potential.
I think that's part of the excitement if you're like a software engineer creating apps for a phone,
Right.
Because you can create a new idea, or sometimes it's taking a good idea and making it better, but still there's a lot of creativity involved.
What happened after so you had this invention? What happened after that? Any sort of interesting thing
After we got the laser
Yeah.
system working? Well, we just started making very rapid progress, but the money died a few years later. So I guess we got it to Lays in 2005. We started the research in 2001. And then we had the 500 watt system in 2011, I think, maybe 10 or 11. That by itself tells you, it's like, okay, start of nothing to something, that can burn things, was 10 years to get there. So research takes a while. And aerospace is historically not a really fast business. And that's one of the reasons that venture capitalists are a little hands-off on a lot of, or they're a little more reserved about investing in aerospace, because it takes longer to get to where they want to be in terms of that return on investment. Yeah. And so, but that also probably was the feather in the cap that led to being elected as a fellow in the AIAA, American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, was that laser discovery. So that was probably the second proudest professional moment.
Why is that?
Being a fellow, there's not many fellows in the world. In AIAA, every society kind of has their own fellows, and I'm also a SPE fellow now too, so that was also a proud moment. But AIAA was sort of the first one, and I've done a lot with the AIAA. I guess this year, I won the Sustained Service Award for AIAA, because I've been involved in that organization since 84, 83 maybe. It's been a long time.
How transferable or useful are these titles or awards? And like when you look past just the like giving aspect of it.
I think mostly there's just a little badge on it's if you make fellow, then or associate fellow, then people can look at that and say, okay, they've accomplished something that has been judged by their peers to be significant. So in that sense, it's an honor to have received that election.
A lot of the work that you did for some of the work that you've done. You use genetic
Algorithms,
which
yeah.
you mentioned about interesting in doing like biogenetics and things like that. Why were they the right approach to solve the problem that you were solving? Out of the many things you could have done.
So it was. I was just reading a science book. Yeah, God, I've forgotten who wrote the book now. And I stumbled. It was about search and optimization and things like that. And I came across this genetic algorithms approach, and it seemed very sensible and practical. And I happened to be doing a computer modeling problem on the coil laser. And I was looking to find an optimal set of parameters that best matched the experimental data. And what I was finding is, it's like, okay, I run a case, and then I have to run another case, and run another case, and run another case. And so by creating the GA, or my version of it, I didn't create genetic algorithms, but by creating my GA and then incorporating the laser code into it, I was able to automate this process where I could turn it loose and walk away for a week while it went through thousands and thousands of iterations searching for the most optimal solution and eliminating cases that weren't of interest. And it worked. So that was fun. And that actually turned out to be, I think, one of the things that helped to get the fellow in AAA, because at some point I thought about selling the code, and I talked to David Goldberg, who happened to be here at Illinois, and he was, I'll say he was a GA wizard, one of the early GA people, and he said, well, you can sell it. Yours is a little unique in that it's Fortran, but there's a lot of GAs out there, and trying to support it, and if somebody's paying you money, then they're going to want support for it and things like that. It might be more cumbersome than it's worth. So I just decided, okay, I'll put it online. It'll be open source. And that has resulted in, I think there's about 900 citations now of my papers. People have downloaded the GA and done, master's theses or Ph.D. theses, or dissertations with it. And so that was very exciting. And then at one point, I was trying to evolve my GA, and I came up with a new technique called what I call the secure GA, which was just a little bit faster at getting to the optimal. And I found out my dad had prostate cancer. And somehow the timing was such that a person from SUNY Stony Brook? Can't remember. Binghamton, I think. No, Stony Brook. Contacted me, and they were doing research on radioactive seed implantation on the prostate to best treat the cancer and get rid of it. And one of the problems was they would measure the prostate, and then they would go away while they had a computer program that would try and optimize the placement of the seeds to kill the cancer. And then 2 weeks later, they would come back and have the surgery. The problem is prostate cancer could change in 2 weeks. So the idea was, take a code that's fast enough to search automatically to find that solution within 15 minutes to 30 minutes. And so I helped these people, these researchers, implement my GA into their seed implantation routine, and then they were able to do their surgeries within 15 to 30 minutes after the prostate was measured, and they had success. So that was, an exciting thing for me, and it was a very strange twist off path, but it really showed that the GA could be used for all sorts of things.
How many lines of code was this program?
It was only probably about 10,000 lines of code. And at one point, I also had help from a guy at HP Compaq. I think he was originally with Compaq, and Compaq got bought by HP, so then he was with HP. But anyway, he helped to optimize. He flipped some of the variable strings so that they were faster for parallel processing. So that was interesting. I think I made a top 10 cut of this spec. What was it called? It was a programming competition thing. But there's a lot of fun things with GAs. It's a very interesting technique, and you can adapt it. There's various parameters you can do to help. Different problems have different sets of parameters that work a little bit better or worse.
What drives you to do the things that you do?
Good question. I mean, originally, I would say, the desire to be an astronaut. Mm-hmm. But just doing things. I don't mind relaxing, but it's hard for me to relax for too long. So I try and keep busy. But I think mostly my brain is almost always going. Mm. It's hard to shut it off. Even when I'm sitting watching something, my brain is going.
Looking for ideas and making connections.
Yeah. A lot of times when I'm just watching something, it's like, oh, hey. Can spark an idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's good that it's not something that's exhaustible, like money, or sure, there can be motivations for people, but I think the best kind comes from when you genuinely want to do what you want to do.
Yeah, I would say right now, I wanted to be an astronaut, and when I wasn't, and I decided that wasn't going to happen, that was hard emotionally. But now the next best thing is, okay, I want to put something in space, and I want to have it work. I want to help other astronauts in the future. So this shift in my gears from being a laser scientist to a rocket scientist has also been very interesting, and has been an exciting turn for me, a revitalization, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide to stay in Champaign? Even you're running an aerospace company, right? And a lot of the aerospace development is happening on the West Coast.
Yeah, great question.
So what kept you here?
So I got my master's in '86, and my ex-wife, and I decided to go out to LA for a couple of years, and we worked at TRW, which is now part of Northrop. Mm-hmm. And as I was telling you earlier, it was very exciting, very fun. I learned a ton, but there's a point where you start to feel like a little cog in the big machine. And that was a little less attractive to me. Plus, at that point, I'd seen all the attractions out in LA, and so that was no longer as exciting. Mm. And the thing that probably really drove us away was we lived 5 miles away from work, but it took a half an hour to get there, a half an hour to get back, day after day after day after day. So we came back to Illinois to get our Ph.D.s, and then at that time, so we graduated in '92. At that time, it was a bit of a downturn in the aerospace industry, and so we'd each gotten offers in different locations, but Illinois was the only place that gave us 2 offers in the same place. So we stayed. And then in 98, we decided to start the company. And then we'd had our first child in 97, our second child in 99. And then we were just here, you know, and CU Aerospace had become baby number 3. And we got divorced, but still, it's like, okay, my kids are here, and CU Aerospace, my 3rd kid is here too. So I'm going to stay here and I'm going to make it work. And, you know, I grew up in Urbana, so I know the advantages of being here. It's a calmer environment. It's a lower cost of living environment. So there's pluses and minuses to every place you go to. And so I just chose to accept the pluses and stay here. And it also, you know, there's other people in Illinois and the Midwest that want to stay in the Midwest. There's no other aerospace company here. So it seemed to be a good fit. And we were able to work a lot with the university. We still work a fair amount with the university. And, you know, the wealth of talented students and excited students with creative ideas, you know, not every idea is a good idea, but creativity and thinking can spark other people's ideas. So talking, communication, that's all really key.
I find it interesting that you even incorporated like Champaign, Urbana in the name.
Yeah, well, that was a desire to fly under the radar a little bit, be a little low key. Originally, I was telling you earlier, we were thinking UC Aerospace because UIUC.
Right.
But we said, no, everybody's going to confuse us with the University of California.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, CU. We'll do CU. And what we didn't realize at the time was that the University of Colorado Boulder also doesn't like to go by UC, so they go by CU.
CU.
So they have a very good aerospace department, and they go by CU Aerospace.
So when you look up CU Aerospace.
So the very first smallsat conference that we went to and had a booth, we had this banner, CU Aerospace. And there were hundreds of people that came up to us. And I swear 95% of them came up and said, so how's Boulder doing? It's like, okay, this is never happening again. So we switched. We're still CU Aerospace technically, but our logo is usually more CUA. Right. And then it forces people to ask, what does CUA stand for? And also our banner now has a little picture of Illinois with a star and Champaign.
To make it even clearer.
To make it really clear. And I haven't had that comment about Boulder for a long time. But still working with people in the space industry, if they don't know who we are already, then they usually think that we are in Boulder. So we're trying to dispel that.
You worked during your undergrad and academic career. You worked at McDonald's for a number of years. What did that teach you about, first about people, second about management, and third about the value of money?
Yeah, good question. All right, so I was working at McDonald's as an undergrad, and I was a geeky kid in grade school, junior high, and high school. And I knew how to interact with my geeky friends, but I didn't really know how to interact very well with people. So I learned how to interact with people. And it also helped to dispel any. It's like, oh, I'm smart or smarter than you, and it's like everybody's smart in their own way, and everybody has their own talents. Everybody's better than everybody else in some way, and I don't think I recognized that, and so it helped me to be a better person. And then in terms of management, I was a manager at McDonald's after about, I don't know, a year and a half or something like that. Year and a half or 2 years. It was probably more like 2 years. And that helped to, get me to understand how, in certain situations you want your best people working in your best spots. Because you try and mix it up so everybody is doesn't get bored, but also, in critical times, you want your best people working where they're best. Yeah, and at critical times, it's like, okay, I got a lunch rush. I got 3 buses that just fold in, and I got a lot of starving athletes or band members. And so managing people, but the dynamics also are a little different now because people don't like to be bossed around. So you tell them, and some people react differently. So then you have to learn how to interact with people when you're their boss. And that's proven useful over the years once we started the company too. And then money. Was that the
money? Yeah.
Money. So, interesting question. How do I answer that? You also learn that I grew up middle class. And I'm very, I feel very blessed to have grown up with the parents I had. And in the conditions I did. But there were a lot of poor people. And I don't think I really, it's like I saw poor people on TV, but there are a lot of poor people. And I hope that we can domestically, figure out some way to help that situation better. It's still, there's a long ways to go. But it helped me gain a lot of real world perspective working there from so many different ways. It was actually a very valuable experience.
Would you say that you grew more compassionate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did your kids work there?
No, my kids did not work at McDonald's. Let's see. I'm not sure where. Katie. Not sure what high school jobs Katie had. Annie worked at the theater for a few months. They both worked for CU Aerospace a little bit. Not too long. They'd had enough of Dad. But I'm very proud of both of them. They're very good young women.
What do they do now?
So Katie works for SpaceX.
Oh, okay. There you go.
And Annie is getting her Ph.D. at the University of Colorado Boulder.
Oh, so they're
in
doing,
physics.
Oh, so they're both engineering, science.
Yeah. So Katie got her undergrad in aerospace here. She went to MIT, got her master's there, and now she's at SpaceX.
And then the other daughter is PhD in physics.
Yeah, she went to Princeton for physics, and now she's at UC Boulder.
What's her field in physics?
It has
Lasers.
no. It's got to do a lot with the quantum the quantum mechanics of atoms and freezing them and slowing them down, things like that. It's beyond my actual understanding of quantum mechanics. But I think she might use lasers in the process of taking her data.
Hopefully she remembers who to call.
Different kind of lasers, typically. I worked with bigger, higher energy ones.
Yeah.
She works with smaller ones. They're high power probably, but smaller.
That's interesting. That's interesting that they still did, science, aerospace related things, because usually, a lot of the times, let's say if you do the things you do like aerospace, physics, lasers, things like that, kids usually try to do the opposite or whatever. Was there anything that you did or didn't do while raising them that didn't influence or influence?
I tried not to interfere with their desires, to be honest. I think, even though my ex-wife and I got divorced, I think we've both been really well-intentioned for the kids, now young adults. So I did start them on violin lessons when they were very young. And Katie actually was quite good, and Annie was quite decent too. I would take them to violin camps for a while. But then when they got into high school, they started having different interests. But I think it helped we did the Suzuki method, and I think that helped to teach them some discipline. But like I said, I did say, whatever you do, don't go into acting or music. But otherwise, do what you're happy with.
What's the Suzuki method?
It's sort of a rigid, systematic way of learning, but they start you out just learning to play the violin, not reading music. You don't even read music for 3 years or something. That's not true. It's not that long, but you learn the feel of the violin, how to stand. There's a certain stance that you want to have with it, how to hold the violin, how to, stroke the bow, things like that. And then you're doing it with other kids. It doesn't matter what age they are. And you play in groups, and then as you would advance, you would keep playing, and they would, and then the ones that are younger, they would stop playing at the point where they don't know a certain tune in a performance, that is. But I think one of the coolest things was when there was the Suzuki camp in Stevens Point in Wisconsin. I took them to that like 3 or 4 years, and just seeing this gym filled with 400 violinists all going at it at once and together was pretty impressive. Even though, it starts out as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. That's what you learn first. But I've heard that song so many times.
Why do you advise against acting or music?
I just don't like the odds.
Okay.
There's so many talented actors that don't have jobs. Same with musicians that don't have jobs or just scraping by. I don't want to see my kids scrape by. They've got a lot of skills. They can do something without scraping by.
Do you play any instruments?
I played the trumpet badly when I was in junior high and high school. But I was not particularly good. I think I ended up playing second or third chair, but third chair. I had 2 really good players ahead of me. So one was I think he ended up ranked 4th nationally in college.
It's a little tough for you to get the spot.
Yeah. No, that was something I did more for the social environment, and a lot of my geeky friends were in band too, so that was a way of sticking together. But the talented ones just were obviously so far beyond me that sometimes you just know this isn't for me.
Mm.
What's the future of space propulsion? I mean, you've been working a lot of electric propulsion things. That seems to be the case. There's some proposals for nuclear propulsion, but that's sort of futuristic.
So nuclear propulsion is exciting, and there's some potential there. I think probably the power source is not ultimately nuclear, it's just solar, with solar arrays. And then what we're looking a lot at what's called a magnetoplasmadynamic thruster, MPD, as the real EP device for big high power systems that could start to go between planets faster. But I think that it's hard to know what system is going to get there first. But I mean, obviously rockets can get places, but still a journey to Mars, you're looking at probably 9 months there, and then you either stay for a year or you stay for 2 weeks, and then it's 6 months back. And those windows only open up every couple of years. Right. So having some faster propulsion would be really critical if you really want to have a Mars colony. And that could be nuclear. It could be a solar-driven power system. So I think that's the future ultimately. Yeah.
You've mentioned being inspired by Star Trek and all the shows.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we'll ever do interstellar travel, and also even faster than the speed of light, or close to it?
I think there is a physics that allows that, but we just don't know what that physics is. I mean, maybe I'm hopeful in that sense, but wormholes, black holes are really weird. What happens with all that mass? And maybe there's wormholes between black holes. I don't know. But I think that interstellar travel is likely eventually. You can do interstellar travel more conventionally. I'm reading a book by Kim Stanley Robinson right now called Aurora, which is kind of interesting. It's more than kind of interesting, it's very interesting. Where they do go from Earth to Tau Ceti, but it's like 170 years. And that's at 1/10 the speed of light. So it's, that's plausible, but man, I'm not sure that one's worth it. That's a long journey. And obviously you go through multiple generations to get there. There's also solar sails. Solar sails have a lot of potential. I think they probably have more potential near Earth, or not necessarily near Earth, but say Saturn, Jupiter, and closer in. You get too far out and the solar photon pressure gets so small that the thrust gets so small that you start to lose advantages. But solar sails have the advantage of being able to potentially have a payload fraction. So typical rocket, your payload fraction to Jupiter from Earth is maybe 10%. With a solar sail, you can get that up to 65% or so. So there's a big mass advantage. You can either deliver a bigger sized payload, or you can launch a smaller payload for less money and get it there. Sorry, launch the same size payload.
What should be the right? I mean, so there are multiple ways to do that. Physics, obviously, finding new physics. Perhaps just launching a Starship and just getting going somewhere. But no one seems to be, fully saying we're going to do interstellar, travel.
Yeah, well,
what-
I am a firm believer that for the human species to survive, we need to go interstellar. We need to find other planets, because one thing that's guaranteed is the sun will blow up. It will go red giant and absorb Earth. But admittedly, that's a very long ways away, so we've got a lot of time, but you got to start somewhere. So it's good that people are thinking about it, but by the same token, I don't think we should spend $1 bazillion trying to do it right now. I think that would be a misappropriation of funds, probably.
Yeah, it's interesting because, if you don't try it, obviously it doesn't happen. But it's also not the right time, because maybe there's more efficient ways to allocate the capital. So you sort of have this catch-22 where
Yeah,
you don't start it because
there's a lot of catch-22s.
yeah.
Yeah, and politicians have to decide, and a lot of time their decision is based on who's going to vote for them. And it's in some ways it's unfortunate, because a lot of times politicians just make decisions based on their voters and not necessarily what they actually believe is the right thing to do. I think we had a lot. Right now, I think it's particularly divisive. I don't know how we keep ending up on politics, but we do in some sense, because politics is very, it dominates the aerospace industry in many ways. You've got defense, and you've got NASA. So, and then you've also got like the FAA that has certain power over commercial aircraft. So there's a lot of government involvement. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Aerospace companies have the way how they've been run, and the reason how they're able to survive it's sort of interesting, because it's very unique in that sense that you need to rely on either government, defense, type of things. You've been running an aerospace company for almost 30 years. Is there besides commercial, is there a different approach to running an aerospace company without having to rely on, let's say, NASA or sort of government-based agencies?
Well, if you pick a certain technology, let's say SpaceX, they wanted to start launching. Elon Musk wanted to start launching rockets. So he founded a company, and he funded a lot of it. And then he started getting investors. But, that was a venture capital, that was sort of a single, it's like, we're going to launch rockets, single avenue. And I remember the time that I met him, heard him speak, he was talking, this was just after I think the fourth Falcon 1 launch. And the first three failed. And he said, if 4 had failed, the company was done. But it succeeded. And so they kept rolling. They got more funding in, and they were able to keep going. But so I think part of where I'm going is, if aerospace companies that form with one technology are usually going to die within 4 years, let's say, and you maybe have 8. It's very, like we were talking about earlier, it's very cyclical. Between DoD and NASA, sometimes usually when DoD's up, NASA's down, and vice versa. Right now, actually, both of them are kind of up. But in those downturns, like we used to be from 2000, so we started as a rocket company, in a sense.
Really?
Our first business was in the in-space propulsion area.
Right.
But it was for bigger satellites, and we could only sort of handle the size of the technology here. And then we became a laser company. But again, when you start thinking, we got our system up to 500 watts, and we could have taken it probably to 5 kilowatts. But we were talking about systems that ultimately wanted to be a megawatt, and we were not set up to handle a megawatt in the scale size of our company. And so that the laser side ran from, say, 2003 to 2011 or so. I took over as president in 2011, and one of the things that I'd observed on the financial side is that we'd sort of peaked at about, or plateaued at about $1 million in revenue every year for several years. And it's like, okay, we need to get out of this rut, and we also need to find, we need to be more than just a research company. And so I shifted the focus a little bit to say, all right, let's think at the end of a phase 1, phase 2 SBIR program, what can we actually have as a product? And we started thinking, okay, well, it's not going to be a thruster this big or a laser this big. It's going to be a small propulsion system this big, this size of a water bottle sort of thing. And so then we built our first propulsion system that we delivered to the Air Force. We delivered 8 systems in 2014. Those went to an agency that shall not be named for missions that I shall not know about. And so I don't know if they're actually flying in space or if they're sitting in a box in a warehouse next to the Ark of the Last Covenant, which is a possibility. Well, I don't know. That depends, I guess, if you believe in the Ark of the Lost Covenant. But anyway, I don't know if they're flying. But then we just kept coming up with technology ideas. That idea kind of dwindled because while the system worked extremely well and it was very stable, it was using a new propellant. It was using sulfur dioxide, which people usually think of, okay, take sulfur dioxide, add water, and I get sulfuric acid. That's not good. But in space, it's fine. But anyway, people were a little nervous about it. It was a new propellant. And so we started thinking, okay, well, what can we do that gets away from that problem? And so then we started going into refrigerant-based systems. And so now one of our systems uses either R134, which is a standard refrigerant in car air conditioning systems, or R236, which is another refrigerant which is standard in a lot of fire extinguishers. So pretty benign. And then we started getting more exotic. We started thinking, okay, well, we did all this work on these pulse plasma thrusters back in the early 2000s. How can we make them better? And so then some of the engineers got really clever, and instead of blocks of Teflon, we started feeding a fiber. And that turned out to be a huge increase. We were getting 3 times the performance that we used to get. and so anyway, one idea led to another, and now we are at the brink of having 3 different propulsion technologies going to fly next year. So it's actually a really exciting time for the company, because that'll be that moment, get something to fly in space that works.
That you were part of building.
That we were part of building and thinking about and designing. And yeah, so we've got the the dual propulsion experiment duplex CubeSat, which is a satellite about the size of a boot box, and it's got one monofilament vaporization propulsion system on one side and one fiber-fed pulse plasma thruster on the other side. So we'll be able to test 2 systems on the same satellite, sort of a 2-for-1 satellite. And then the other system that's going to fly is the CubeSat High Impulse Propulsion System, or CHIPS. That is going to an aerospace customer who I can't name, for a mission I actually don't know about. But we are now building 5 flight units for this customer and delivering those in October, probably for flight sometime in early 2024 is my guess. So, like I said, this right now is a super exciting time for the company. And, we keep coming up with ideas and going to be expanding and so on. We just won 2 more Phase 2 SBIRs a week ago. That's when we found out.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, now we got to do the work. Like, oh God, hey, we won. Now we got to do the work. But it's the kind of problem you want to have. But it does mean, we got to hire people. But we got to hire. One of the hard parts of business is hiring not just people, but the right people. And you have to hire them that they can be talented, they can be great, but if they don't fit in the culture, then that could be a problem. And we try to have a sort of kinder, friendlier company culture. But finding the right people is important. And that's not always easy to do. It's also hiring them to come here.
That is true.
Has been a problem. We've made offers, multiple offers to people from the coasts. They never come. And that's just the nature of the business because of our location. Whenever I meet with city council members or the mayor or anything like that, I always tell them they should build a 3,000-foot mountain in the background here somewhere, and that'll bring people.
You really think so?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to do.
3,000 feet's pretty tall.
Well, I mean, maybe not 3,000 feet, but I mean, something. I mean,
yeah, you'd be surprised how much. It's probably more expensive than you think. Also, you really want, mountains shouldn't just be dirt. They need to be, grounded in some big thick rock and things like that. Otherwise, they just erode really easily. But yeah, I remember back when the Beckman Institute first opened. This was also in the early days of the web, and somebody in the media group at Beckman put an image of Beckman and a mountain in the background. And they were forced to take it down because it was false advertising.
that's funny. Have those people in the city council or the mayor or whatever?
They just laugh.
I mean, this doesn't seem like too crazy of an idea. I mean, it would bring a lot of people here.
Oh yeah, I think it would bring a lot of people here. A lot of people would stay. You could literally have some skiing here in the winter times. Even though it doesn't, this year it hardly snowed here at all. But if you were 3,000 feet up, and the temperature was 5 degrees lower, or 10 degrees lower, then you would get snow on a mountaintop. And you can also do artificial snow too.
Yeah.
So you can do, but it also makes, if it's, it doesn't have to be the Rockies, but if it's big enough, then you can start to think of, you've got a hiking situation. People can hike up the mountain, hike down, but you can put a golf course around the mountain. Makes a really pretty golf course. There's a lot of things you could potentially do, but who's going to pay for it? That's what ultimately stops it. It's like, great idea. Who's going to pay for it? In general, people wouldn't pay for that. Farmers would say, farmers will say, yeah, I've got my land. That's just going to take land away, from good farming land away. I don't want that.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Speculating.
Yeah.
They might love it. then again, they might love it.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, who knows? Yeah, it'd be interesting after you get more of aerospace, building a mountain in Urbana-Champaign.
Yeah, I'd love to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen.
What advice would you have for someone like us who's curious, who wants to like work and help in pushing these frontiers of science and just helping society progress and just work on interesting problems?
Perseverance. Running the business has been, sort of the greatest adventure of my life. The most frustrating, the most exciting, the most agonizing, the most stressing. It's the whole mix of emotions. But ultimately, having perseverance really pays off. And don't get too discouraged at people saying no. We've written a lot of proposals. The first 3 proposals we wrote, nothing. So that was 1998. It was a good thing I kept my day job at the university. But then 1999, we got our first contract. I went full-time and been full-time ever since. So, but there's ups and downs, and having some faith, but you want to be practical and logical about it too. I guess those are my my thoughts to that.
What was the first contract, if you can share?
That was the propulsion system.
Got it. Okay.
It was a pulse plasma thruster that there was a brick. It's really heavy. It didn't seem all that big, but boy, was it heavy. And then after 3 years, we developed a version that was just as good and probably weighed 1/10 the mass. But that ultimately led to the fight once we had time to rethink. And also it's a mix of technology. So in the old, 25 years ago, the capacitor technology was fairly heavy. And somewhere in there, they developed these multi-layer ceramic capacitors, which are really tiny, but can hold a lot of energy. And so that was one of the innovations, was being able to recognize, okay, we can take that technology, take that advance, marry it with another advanced impulse plasma thrusters, and get 3-4 times the performance. So keeping aware of other technological advancements can also, watching things helps trigger other ideas.
Very interesting. At the end of our shows, we have a section called Overrated or Underrated.
Okay.
Where we basically give you a topic or statement, and you tell us whether you think it's overrated or underrated, and you tell us why.
Okay.
The first one is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Overrated or underrated?
I love that book. So I would say underrated. I think it's a wonderful book for anybody involved in business to look at. It goes into some sort of clear analysis of different companies and how they succeed or don't succeed, the hedgehog concept, things like that. Love the book. I always recommend it.
Has there been a specific lesson that you use while running CU Aerospace?
The hedgehog concept, I would say, I've used. I've tried to. We do a lot of things, so that goes into what's his next book called, but the bullets and cannonballs. So we shoot a lot of bullets, but we see what hits, and then we start firing more people power at those, the cannonballs. So I really enjoy his books, and actually listening to him on the audio books is phenomenal. He's a great presenter.
Right, next one.
eVTOLs.
I don't know. I feel, those are going to be a wave of the future. The issue at hand, I might go a little on the overrated, ahead of the curve side, because the notion of having taxi drivers, say, driving around people. That's also, urban air mobility. So your average Joe shouldn't necessarily have a license to fly one of those.
Right.
I have my private pilot's license. I haven't flown for years, and I would actually go get recertified, to be honest, before I did anything. But, legally I'd have to, but sorry, I digress. So it really has to be, you have to be careful about that. I think we already have a situation where you go on any plane these days and you're seeing a lot of young pilots who, in the older days, it was always these fighter jocks who were flying planes, or, there were some female pilots that also went through the fighter training. And you can it's like, okay, they had a lot of experience in bad weather situations. The younger pilots get a little more worried about, And so then if you now expand that envelope to having taxi drivers flying these things, I worry a little bit. So we may be a little ahead of the game, but still, I think the technology has to evolve, and then maybe it's just a limited audience for it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think they would be automated, so no.
Yeah, if it's automated, that can have different issues too, but automated. I don't know. I think if you do automated, you'd want to very much limit the weather conditions that would be allowed to fly in.
Just because of the unpredictability, or?
Yeah, or you would have an automation system that was very tied into the weather, not the weather stations, weather alerts, wherever weather measurements are made, so that you can learn about, tornadic events, for example. Those can be very random, and you don't want to be flying in those situations. Automation, I think, would really struggle there.
All right. The next one. Kelly Johnson from Skunkworks. Overrated or underrated?
I don't know enough to say.
He's the guy, he's the guy who developed the I guess the most famous thing that he did was the Blackbird.
Okay. Okay. I thought you were talking about somebody more recent.
No.
No, I think he's really cool. So I will say underrated. But I don't know terribly much about him to give an educated assessment.
Next one, the light sail, the concept of sending our just ships just propelled by the sun, photons.
So solar sail, light sail, I think is actually propelled by lasers.
Okay. Oh, from the Earth.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So solar sails, I think, are underrated for interplanetary travel, but overrated for interstellar travel. So interplanetary, so this, I was talking about payload fraction. So it can be a real advantage if you get the sail lengths or sizes large enough. You can do missions to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn as fast as you can do with rockets, and for probably a lot less money. So I like solar sails. Light sails, where you're firing a laser at something, plausible to a point. So beams diverge. Laser beams diverge. That's just Gaussian physics. So there's only so, at some point they get so far away that they're, your beam could be the size of this room, and relative size. The beam is the size of this room, but the sail is only this, this big. And so it becomes a waste of energy almost. So light sails would probably be good for initial near-Earth propulsion, or near wherever the laser is. So if you're got a laser on a moon of Saturn or something, and you're trying to propel out to Neptune, and maybe that can have some effect. But if you're shooting your laser from the moon to Jupiter, I think you're going to have problems. The other thing is the whole dynamics of the rotating planet. How do you? It's really hard to. You got the planet's rotating, so it's like there's a point where you physically can't aim that laser. You'd have to have lasers all around the planet.
Right.
Or even with the moon, it might work for 10 days straight, but then you're screwed for another 10, 15, 16 days, whatever. So
that's a good point.
So light sails, I'm a lot more skeptical about.
And then the last one here, the concept of life in the universe, aliens / whatever else you want to.
It's all over the place.
Overrated or underrated?
Underrated. I think it's all over the place. I think there's life. I would not be at all surprised if we had been visited by aliens at one point in the Earth's history. You look at some similarities between the pyramids and things like that, and it makes you start to wonder. But no, I think that statistically there has to be life all over the universe. There's just no way it doesn't exist.
Fermi's paradox.
Yeah. But then you get into, okay, the universe is so long, you know, how much overlap is there between that civilization and our civilization, and you know, who knows? That's where you really want the new physics so that you can go to all these different stars and find out. But yeah, I really truly hope that that new physics is out there. I'm not intelligent enough to figure that out, but I certainly hope somebody does. The next Einstein or whoever.
If you had to take a wild guess, do you think they're more advanced or less advanced?
You mean other civilizations?
Yeah.
I think it's a mix of both. We've only been, humans have only had civilization, say, maybe 12,000 years, depending on how you count. So I would think that there's civilizations on both sides. On an average, probably more civilizations are less advanced. But because then you have to get into defining how the species are. There might be a dog species that works well together, but might not be, and maybe they figured out how to have opposable thumbs and start fires or whatnot, but didn't have quite the right mix to get to human stage.
A lot of luck. A lot of randomness.
A lot of randomness and luck. That's right.
And things that you cannot control.
Yeah.
But I think with that would be a great place to end our conversation. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Dr. Carroll, for
You're
coming
welcome.
and talking to us.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, it was a lot of insights, and I don't know, it feels good to just hear from someone who's working in the industry and just learning from all the things that might shape the future that we're going towards. So thank you for all the work that you're doing and for being willing to share it with many others and just inspire many young minds to pursue, explore, and just take the next step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good luck on
Got to take risks.
on the launches coming up.
Thank you.
Should be fun.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And toes and legs and everything. All right, very good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.